It, Goosebumps, Stranger Things, and even Five Nights at Freddy's. Stories born in 80s cheese and childhood wonder with a dash of something darker hidden just underneath. Stories you and your friends will inhabit and hopefully survive in Kids on Bikes. The best part? It takes no time or commitment. I've played and ran a lot of role-playing games, but I've never seen anything like Kids on Bike's town building mechanic. At the start of every game, the players go in a circle answering questions about the small town they'll be calling home. These range from the town's name, to its largest industry, to its greatest shame, which means two things. One, your players are going to start the game with a feeling of ownership and connection to their environment. And two, you will get a lot of towns with names like Titties, Michigan, or Ligma, Pennsylvania. Kids on Bikes has been streamlined for short, sweet one-shots. Character creation is as simple as picking a class, or trope as they're called, and that's it. These tropes are your typical fare for 80s horror. The nerd, the jock, the loner weirdo, etc., etc. There are even a few adult tropes, my favorite being the overprotective parent. In my first game of Kids on Bikes, we had a group of kids trying to find their lost friend, but the friend's hysterical mother was also there, commenting on how everything reminded her of her son and going apeshit on everyone who stood in their way. The age associated with your trope also brings some advantages. Kids heal faster but are weaker. Adults start the game with a skill associated with their profession. And teenagers are stronger and faster than either kids or adults. They also get a skill called Rebellious. With the way tropes are laid out, there's nothing stopping you from making a one-shot reliving teen dramas like Clueless, American Pie, or even Mean Girls. Now this game is great. And at less than $25 for the core rulebook, it's hard to complain. But there are a few downsides. The main one being a lack of either a perception or investigation skill. That's a big problem since 90% of the game will be investigating. Also of note, while not necessarily a problem, is the fact that Kids on Bikes is not made for long campaigns. It's fun, fast-paced, and can be learned in less than an hour, but because of that, it's not suited for, nor was it created for, long-running campaigns. Like a lot of good horror fiction, Kids on Bikes is made for short stories, where the protagonists don't have a guarantee of getting out alive. Which brings me to my next point. The first time I ran Kids on Bikes was my second year at art school. A bunch of us got together in my buddy's dorm to sit down and play for the next 4 hours. We had a blast making characters. A part of the game is going in a circle and rolling on a chart to see how your characters know each other. These can range from positive to neutral to negative. For some examples, if you roll a 5 on the chart, the book asks you, why do you care about this character more than they care about you? Alternatively, you could also get, what about this character always makes you happy? Or, what secret are you keeping from this character that you would be devastated if they found out? As you can imagine, this leads to a lot of fun, and before the game even starts, you are collectively crafting stories. They finished making the town and figuring out how they felt about each other, and we were ready to begin. Through the course of the night, they found a lead which the adults refused to investigate. Searching the town and eventually the woods, I don't have enough time in this video to go into the specifics, they found that the boy Billy that they were searching for was already dead, but that more children had been led away by strange music into an unnatural fog. Following, they found a macabre ceremony in the woods, led by a hidden, hooded figure. Turning to face the party, they saw that he had 3 eyes. One of the players turned to me and said, I grab my knife and I go for the eyes. And this is where the problem began. I had read the rules. Hell, coming in at only 76 pages, I might have read it multiple times at this point. I didn't remember what it specifically said about combat, though. It had been a while since I got the book, so I assumed that I had just forgotten. Without an initiative stat, there were no clear combat turns, and with no HP, it was hard to say how close the children were to death, or even how close the bad guy was to death. And there's a reason for that. The fight was a slog, but we ended up having fun as they barely survived, carving this thing's eyes out and saving the rest of the children. It was a good time overall, but I made sure that the next time we decided to play Kids on Bikes, I would read the combat rules. And this is what they said. From the section titled Injuries and Death. During the course of the game, one or more of the characters will likely be injured. In this game, there are no hit points, but none of you are immortal. Far from it. Compared to the forces you will probably come into contact with, you're exceptionally fragile. A well-aimed bullet from a government agent, the quick flick of a monster's jaws, or even a telekinetic character could end things in a moment. In this game, violence should never be without consequence. Rather than trading blow after blow, stat roll and applicable skill rolls should determine the outcome of a fight before it even starts. Players and the GM should narrate the outcome. The difference between rolls and the applicable modifiers should determine the amount of damage that a player sustains. Refer to the chart below and who gains narrative control over the encounter. And what the chart below will show you is that if a player rolls badly, they lose narrative control of the scene. This gives the GM full power and authority over the scene, including whether or not the character dies. More on that in a second. Back to art school. It was my second year, though this time towards the end. I was the co-president of the school writing club, and seeing literary value in making the town and the relationships, I decided to run a one-shot for the club. Worth noting, 2 of the 4 players were present for the last game. One player of note was the faculty supervisor for the club. He was our story adaptation teacher, and his name was Michael. We asked him previously if he had ever played a role-playing game which unlocked a horror story worthy of Crit Crab. Mike was a cool dude, and a great teacher. I felt pressure to give him a good time. The game I ran involved a group of teenagers getting trapped in a witch's maze. Defeating the witch, the maze began to collapse. In classic Metroid fashion, the players had to escape, going back through all previous obstacles in a dash for the finish. Michael's character, Grim, had a D4 in flight. Every time they came across a monster or had to avoid falling rubble, he would roll and get a 1. Every single time. Needless to say, I kept finding ways to give him a way out. But after many rolls and at least 3 1s, they had reached the door. Escape was in sight and the witch was hot on their trail. If they failed to escape in time, the portal would close and they would be trapped till next Halloween. 3 players rolled. All successes. Grim was last. Injured and limping towards the door. Nat 1. It was a one-shot, and a horror story. But I still felt bad about killing him. And after that, whenever my friends would talk about that game, they would say, "Shame Tim had to kill his character," or "We did great, except for Tim getting to kill Michael's character." I had done horror games before, and I had killed tons of PCs in those. That never felt wrong, even in fantasy or superhero games, where the players are meant to be powerful, where it's meant to be a power trip. I didn't care, nor did they blame me. So why did I feel wrong this time? Because the combat was narrative driven. There was no HP, no injury chart, no scale. You roll, and if you get a 1, your life is in the GM's hands. It felt personal because in Kids on Bikes, dice rolls, or even mistakes of the players don't decide if you die. The GM does. I did kill Grim. And it's no wonder they called it as such. I could have easily said, well, actually, he barely manages to escape, but with an injury. And maybe I should have done something like that. But at the same time, it's a horror game. and for a one-shot, you expect death to be a part of it. So you're in this weird limbo as a GM. Do you let everyone survive, or do you get bloodthirsty? I like the idea of this system on paper, but it sucks to be the GM and to have the players know that it's not the dice or rules that killed their character, but you. Regardless, it's still a great game. It requires little to no prep time, it's very cheap, and if you're into analog horror, this is the perfect game system for Backrooms, Vita Carnis, Slender Man. And I can honestly say I've had some of my best role-playing experiences playing this game. But if you're looking to slay monsters or play multiple sessions, then this is really not the game for you. Of note, real quick, I did want to mention that Kids on Bikes is actually the first in a series of low rules games. The next two are Kids on Brooms, which is essentially a Harry Potter knockoff using the Kids on Bikes system. I've yet to play it, but I've heard that it is very simplistic in how it views the magic system, and it's also obviously still very rules-like. Sounds like a good time. As well, they have a game called Teens in Space. Kind of gives me Lost in Space vibes, not really sure what that's about, but if they function similar to Kids on Bikes, they're probably a good time. And with that, we're at the end of the video. I want to thank you all for watching, and if you liked this content, then I'm going to make a lot more. I'm looking forward to making a video on Traveler, Mutants and Masterminds, and eventually most of World of Darkness 5e. So, stay tuned. Once again, thank you. This is Tim saying goodbye.